Hi, this is Andy Braitman. We're at Braitman Studio again. We're going to do the next step on working wet on wet. And the transition between working wet on dry and wet on wet and really working with thicknesses of paint is as big a transition in your life as it's bigger than going from being single to being married. It's a huge step. And for most of us, it's very frightening because we lose control. And I'm going to try to teach you how to have control by handling the viscosity and the thickness and the thinness of your paint. So the first thing we're going to do is start with a rough surface, and that's our previously multi-layered gessoed surface. And we're going to take a thin mixture of paint and turpentine and scrub in a shape. Doesn't matter, we're going to cover the canvas very thinly. I'll show you how to do that. And when I scrub it in, first thing I'm going to do is mix up a cool gray. So I have my mixed black, ultramarine, burnt sienna, throw a little extra blue in, whiten it out so I've got kind of a cool gray. And then I need to make it a little thinner, so I have my option. I can use a little resin gel, that'll help me thin it out and still have it dry more rapidly. I've got in a dropper here, I've got some turpentine, that'll thin it out and let it dry more rapidly. And I've got a knife that'll let me mess up the paint. And then I should have a brush. And I do. So the first thing we're going to do is take and push our strokes into the surface rather than pull them, which give us a closed stroke. We're going to just lightly push the paint across the surface so the roughness of those layers of gesso, all I'm doing is, it's like a temple rubbing. I'm just letting the scrub of my brush reveal the surface of the rough gesso underneath. So as I'm scrubbing in this surface, all I'm doing is revealing that rough texture that's underneath. I'm not trying to make a solid shape. I'm just pushing it across and looking at the surface. It looks like I'm going back and forth. And I am, but I'm just reloading to push. I'm not really putting any paint down on that backward stroke. So I'm loading up the brush and I'm flipping it over and I'm lightly, until I get the paint out, I'm pushing it, but I'm lifting, push and lift, push and lift. But when I do it fast, it looks like I'm scrubbing. Don't scrub. I'm just reloading every time. So the only paint that goes down is the push stroke, and I turn my body up in the wrong direction to make sure that I push that in across that whole surface. And that'll be my first application of paint. And what I'm doing is revealing already a smooth surface that has a controlled chaos. Make sense? Now, for those of you who need the help, I will draw out a shape. What I like to do at this point is figure out the position from a vase and the position of the bouquet of flowers. And depending on how comfortable you are with this and how flat you want it or how real you want it, you may need to look at something, you may need to do it straight from your head, it depends on how fresh you are with it. There's no problem usually getting the shape and the position of the flowers. The problem we have is getting depth to them, putting some flowers in front, getting volume to the vase. So to that end, I will wet the surface, and while it's wetting, for this I'll just use a little turpentine, and I'll start to, at the top of the canvas, I'll start to pull and liquefy, get a little more liquid on the surface of the canvas, so I have something wet to work with. And but I'm doing it very slowly, and I may actually follow one drip a few times to make sure that I'm pulling paint out of an area and depositing paint in another area. So I'm really trying to move the paint and wet the surface simultaneously, and I'm just trying to make sure that if there's an even, again, it's chaos. I don't want to establish a rhythm, so look at the spaces here. I've got some closer together here, farther apart, no rhythm to that. I want to make certain that I haven't done anything rhythmically this early in the painting. It's all chaotic and artistic. That's another word. We're using chaotic and artistic synonymously right now. So, and you can see I'm using a bit of turpentine, and at this point I haven't used enough to get it all the way to the bottom of the canvas yet. So it's not a question of taking this and squirting it all out and letting it run down. I'm doing very controlled drips that'll let me get it to areas where I want it to be and areas where there may or may not be liquid. And then I'll let this sit that on the side. Then I'll take a paper towel and I'll start the process right now. So I'll start by rubbing out the light areas I want to have. And so this may be the shape of a vase, and I'm looking for, it's a little too boring already. I've got a square canvas, so I don't want to have a too square a shape. So I'll make one of those little, that's a better shape, but it's coming down too far, so I'll stop it here. Do I have enough room for my flowers? Make them peonies, yeah. I have a shape that's here and here, or hydrangeas, something like that, maybe one behind. So I'm just looking at the shape, and then I'll take a little more liquid and paper towel again and actually lift off as much of the color as I can. And I usually try to get this to break the canvas in at least 3 spots. Right now I've just got 1, 2. I've got no break here. I'll probably have it backlit so the shadow's coming this way. I was real successful with like a teapot look that had a handle that came up on this side, so I may do something like that. So I'll just sketch that in at this point to see if it's going to work. And even at this early stage, I'm doing 2 things. I'm beginning to use my dark to shape the vase. And that's just a mixed black, that burnt sienna and ultramarine. So I'm not going to quit until I get a sense of 3-dimensionality to this vase. So I'm looking at the parabola for the top, a light source that says the light's coming this way, so there'll be light on this side, a little bit of a handle that gives me interest along that side, and some sense of symmetry so the pot's not, or the thing's not falling over. And then some dark underneath that's going to hold it all up. Okay, and now that's a good place for me to stop and just sort of stand back and look, which I don't have the room to do, so imagine me standing back and looking. Now I'm going to re-wet it again. And this is for another purpose. This time I'm going to re-wet so that I can draw using a rubber tip tool that I think the manufacturers call a paint shaper. But I like rubber tip tool because when Charlie Edwards says it, it's exciting. Get my rubber tip tool. So what I'm going to do now is draw. And if you can get a hard enough edge, you can actually lift some of the paint if you get it wet enough, so it's not wet enough. And you notice what's happening is I'm finding information and I'm losing information. I'm finding it and I'm losing it. So now I found it and now I've lost it. So I'm going to come back and re-find it. So I'm going to get that wet enough so I can draw on top. Look at what's happening here. Get that shape of the handle, where it's going to be. Begin to size where the bottom of that vase is going to be. That's a little short. That gives me a lot to deal with down here. So I'm going to make that a little longer. Maybe about to here. Taper it off so it looks a little more elegant. Clean this up and begin to place and size the direction of the position of these peonies so that maybe this one will cover this edge. Put something behind here so we see, and the reason I'm putting it behind there is so that I can see the back lip of the vase. And then I need some way to get off the top, so I'll have to put a third blossom in. And the question is where? That's right in the middle, so I'll get rid of that. And move it over here. And still want to reveal that vase every once in a while. The light's coming on this side, so I'm going to work hard. Sorry to scrub that out. And this is going to be more shadowed, so I'm not working as hard at finding what's happening there. I do like the idea of that angled I forget the name of that, but it's got a longer, more elegant neck, so I'm going to pull that down here. And then I'm going to just play with the lip of that vase, see where that's going to be. I lost the handle, but I've got a more interesting shape, so that's okay. And then I'll find some spot for some darks that'll lock it together. And usually right at the top of the vase, there's going to be a dark here, a leaf there. That almost looks like a leaf already. All right, so that'll be a good start.